Today I'm going to tell you the story of a 12-year-old drummer boy who made an extraordinary journey through the heart of the Civil War. Samuel Jenkins promised his dying captain he would carry their regiment's flag home to Boston while fleeing from the bloodiest battle in American history. But what happened next left everyone in shock. Please subscribe to our channel and comment where you're listening from. Samuel's ears rang with the thunder of cannon fire. His small hands, once skilled only at wielding drumstick, now pressed desperately against Captain Harrison's chest, trying to stem the flow of blood. "Hold on, Captain," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "The medics are coming." But they both knew it was a lie. The Union line had broken. The 20th Massachusetts was in retreat, scattered across the Pennsylvania fields. The medics, if any survived, were overwhelmed with hundreds. Captain William Harrison coughed, blood speckling his neatly trimmed beard. At 32, he had been like a father to Samuel during their year together. Now he lay dying on the outskirts of a town called Gettysburg, the victim of a Confederate minie-ball that had torn through his lung. "Samuel," the captain, his Boston accent still proper despite the pain, colored. Samuel glanced at the regimental flag lying in the dirt nearby. The blue silk was torn and stained, but the Massachusetts seal remained intact, surrounded by battle honors from previous engagement. The flag-bearer had fallen an hour earlier. "I'll keep it safe until the regiment regroups," Samuel promised. "No." Harrison gripped the boy's wrist with surprising strength. "Take it home, to my wife in Boston." His breathing grew more labored. "Promise me." Samuel stared in disbelief. Boston was over 300 miles away, through enemy territory, past the Confederate army that was, at this very moment, pushing the Union forces back through the town. "But, sir, I'm just a drummer boy." "You're a soldier of the Union," Harrison countered, his voice fading. "And I'm giving you an order." A nearby explosion showered them with the Confederate advance was getting closer. Samuel could hear the rebel yell rising above the gunfire. "I promise," said finally, understood the last comfort he could offer. Harrison's grip relaxed. He fumbled with his pocket, extracting a small, worn photo. "Elizabeth, tell her I thought of her at the end." His blue eyes fixed on something distant. "Our address is on the back. Tell her I'm sorry I couldn't come home myself." Samuel took the photograph with trembling fingers. A pretty woman with dark hair smiled back at him, frozen in time, and unaware her world was about to shatter. "I will, Captain. I swear it." Harrison's chest rose once more, then stilled. Samuel sat motionless beside him, tears cutting clean tracks through the gunpowder residue on his face. At 12 years old, he had seen more death in the past year than most men witnessed in a lifetime, but Captain Harrison hit him hardest of all. The sounds of battle grew closer. Samuel knew he had only minutes before the Confederate forces overran their position. With shaking hands, he closed the captain's eyes, then carefully folded the blood-stained flag into a tight bundle. It was too large to hide completely. He tucked it inside his blue jacket he could. "Drummer boy," a gruff voice. Sergeant Miller, his face blackened with powder, appeared at the edge of the clearing. "Fall back to Cemetery Ridge. Now!" Samuel pointed at the captain's body. "Sir, we can't leave him. He's gone, boy, and you will be too if you don't move." Samuel hesitated, then quickly removed the captain's insignia and pocketed them along with the photograph. He couldn't carry the body, but he could return these personal effects to Elizabeth Harrison. He grabbed his drum and ran after the sergeant, struggling to keep up with the man's longer strides. All around them, the Union Army of the Potomac was retreating through the town of Gettysburg, regrouping on the hills south of town. The air was thick with smoke, the streets chaotic with wounded men, frightened horses, and abandoned equipment. They had nearly reached the new Union lines when a Confederate shell exploded nearby. Samuel was thrown to the ground, his drum spinning away across the road. When he looked up, Sergeant Miller lay motionless, half his head gone. Samuel retched, then forced himself to his feet. The flag was still secure inside his jacket. His drum was destroyed, the wooden shell shattered beyond repair. For the first time since joining the regiment as a drummer boy, Samuel was truly alone. As the sun began to set over the blood-soaked fields of Gettysburg, Samuel made a decision. The fighting would resume tomorrow, but he wouldn't be part of it. He had a new mission now, a promise to keep. He waited until dark, then slipped away from the Union lines. The flag, folded tightly, was hidden under his uniform. The drumsticks, a comfort, a tool now, were tucked into his belt. In his pocket, the photograph of Elizabeth Harrison seemed to burn against his skin, a constant reminder of his vow. Boston lay northeast, over 300 miles away. Between Samuel and his destination stood the Confederate Army, hostile territory, mountains, rivers, and a war-torn countryside stripped of food and comfort. He was 12 years old, alone and frightened, but he had given his word to a dying man. Samuel Jenkins took a deep breath of the gunpowder-laced air and began walking away from the first day of July, 1863, had seen the bloodiest fighting on Americans. Tomorrow would bring even worse slaughter but Samuel would not be there to witness it. The night was uncomfortably warm, the air still and heavy. Clouds obscured the moon, which suited Samuel's purpose. He moved carefully through the darkness, freezing at every sound. The distinctive crack of rifle fire continued sporadic from the direction of town, along with the moans of wounded men left on the battlefield. Samuel had joined the 20th Massachusetts the previous summer, lying about his age. At 11, he had been tall for his years, though skinny as a rail. His father, killed at Antietam, had been a sergeant in the same regiment. With his mother 2 years dead from consumption and no other family, Samuel had convinced Captain Harrison to take him on as a drummer boy. "The regiment needs good drummers," had said kindly. "The men march on their stomachs, but they march in time to your beat." Now Harrison was dead, and Samuel was a deserter. Technically, he consoled himself with the knowledge that he was following his captain's final order. That had to count for something. By dawn, Samuel had covered nearly 10 miles, staying off the main roads and heading northeast. His small stature and boyish face, which had made him the target of friendly teasing in camp, now became an advantage. If stopped, he could pass for a local farm boy if he could hide his uniform and the precious flag. As the sun rose, Samuel found himself at the edge of a small stream. He was exhausted, hungry, and desperately thirsty. After drinking his fill of the cool water, he examined his resources: half a loaf of hardtack, a nearly empty canteen, the captain's insignia, the photograph, and his drumstick, and, of course, the flag, which was both his mission and his greatest liability. If captured with it, he would be immediately identified as a Union soldier. Samuel removed his blue uniform jacket and turned it inside out. The lining was a dull brown that might pass for civilian clothing at a distance. He wrapped the flag in the remains of his shattered drum, creating a bundle that looked like ordinary baggage. He was contemplating his next move, and voices reached, men speaking with the distinctive drawl of the Deep South. Confederate soldiers, and they were coming his way. Samuel's heart pounded. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide in the open farmland. The voices grew louder. 2 men in gray uniforms emerged from the trees on the opposite bank. "Well, look what we have here," the taller one said, spotting Samuel. "Boy, what are you doing out alone?" Samuel thought quickly. "Heading home, sir, to my uncle's farm near Harrisburg." The soldiers exchanged glances. "Bit young to be traveling alone, ain't you?" the second man asked suspiciously. "Our farm was burned in the fighting, sir," Samuel replied, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Ma and Pa sent me ahead while they salvage what they can." The first soldier's face softened slightly. "War is hell on civilians." He studied Samuel's makeshift. "What have you got there, boy?" Samuel's. "Just some clothes, sir, and Pa's old work tools." The second soldier, began crossing the shallow stream. "Let's have a look, shall we?" Samuel knew discovery meant capture, probably prison. The flag would be taken, his promise broken. Without conscious thought, his hand moved to the drumstick tucked in his belt. "Johnson, leave the boy be," Major called. "We've got scouts to run. Longstreet wants reports on Union positions by noon." Johnson hesitated, already halfway across the stream. Something ain't right about him. He's a scared kid whose home got burned. We've seen hundreds like him. The first soldier gestured. "Come on, the lieutenant will have our hides if we're late." With clear reluctance, Johnson turned back. "You best get on to your uncle's quick, boy," he called to Samuel. "These parts ain't safe." Samuel nodded, not trusting. "And stay off the main roads," the first soldier added. "Union cavalry's been spotted east of here." Samuel watched them disappear into the trees, his legs trembling with relief and delayed fear. The encounter had been too close. He needed to be more careful, more invisible. But the soldiers had unknowingly given him valuable information. Union cavalry to the east meant potential safety if he could find them, and he now knew Confederate General Longstreet's men were nearby, which was a danger to avoid. Gathering his meager belongings, Samuel continued northeast, more determined than ever. Captain Harrison's flag was still set. The promise still held. Behind him, the thunder of artillery resumed at Gettysburg. The second day of battle had begun without him. Samuel traveled only at night for the next 3 days, avoiding the roads where both armies moved their troops and supplies. The distant thunder of artillery from Gettysburg gradually faded behind him. He foraged where he could, stealing ears of corn from fields and drinking from streams. His hardtack was gone by the second day. On the fourth night, rain poured from the sky, soaking him to the skin. Samuel sought shelter in an abandoned barn, its roof partially collapsed, but still offering some protection. He carefully unwrapped the flag to check. It hadn't been damaged by the rain. The silk was still intact, the colors of the 20th Massachusetts preserved despite everything. "Who's there?" A deep voice called from the shadows. Samuel froze, quickly covering the flag with his jacket. A tall black man emerged from behind a stack of moldy hay, a makeshift crutch supporting his weight. His right trouser leg was torn and blood-stained, revealing a poorly bandaged wound. "I asked who you are, boy." The man's voice was cautious and threatening. "Samuel Jenkins," seeing little point in. "Who are you?" "Elijah Freeman." The man studied him closely. "You're military." "Union from the looks of those trousers." Samuel nodded reluctantly. "Drummer boy?" "The 20th Massachusetts." "Long way from your regiment, drummer boy." "I have a mission." Samuel's hand moved protectively over the hidden flag. Elijah's eyes followed the movement. "Important child." "I'm 12, almost 13, Samuel, and my captain gave me his final order before he died at Gettysburg." Something shifted in Elijah's expression. "You were at Gettysburg?" When Samuel nodded, he continued, "Any news of the colored regiments? The 54th Massachusetts?" "They weren't at Gettysburg as far as I know," Samuel replied. "Last I heard, they were heading for South Carolina." Elijah sank onto a wooden crate, grimacing as he extended his injured leg. "My brother joined them. Hope to find him." "You're a soldier, too." "Escaped slave. Was heading north when I took a bullet from a patrol looking for deserters." Elijah gestured his leg. "Been hiding here 3 days." Samuel hesitated, then made a decision. He unwrapped the flag, revealing it to Elijah. "I'm taking this to Boston, to my captain's wife." Elijah's widened. "Boy, that's a regimental color. The Confederates would hang you if they caught you with it." "I promised him." Elijah studied him for a long moment, then "Got family in Boston. Free blacks in the North End." He tapped. "Can't travel fast like this, but I know safe routes. Places where folks help runaways. The Underground Railroad." "What's left of it?" "Wars changed things, but some stations still operate." By morning they had formed an uneasy alliance. Elijah's wound needed proper cleaning and bandaging, which Samuel provided using strips torn from his own shirt. In return, Elijah shared his knowledge of traveling undetected through hostile territory. "We move at night," Elijah instructed. "Stay off roads. Look for signs." "What kind of signs?" "Quilts hanging with certain patterns, lanterns in windows, marks on fence posts." Elijah fashioned a better crutch from a broken rake handle. "They'll help us if we can find them." They set out the following evening, Samuel supporting Elijah when the terrain grew difficult. Progress was painfully slow. A journey that might have taken a healthy man 5 days would take them weeks. On their third night together, they encountered their first station, a small farmhouse, star-patterned quilt hanging on the porch. The farmer, a stern-faced Quaker, took them in without question, fed them soup and cornbread, and allowed them to sleep in his hayloft. "These should know there are Confederate patrols searching for an escaped drummer boy," the farmer told Samuel, as they prepared to leave the next night. "They say he stole something valuable." Samuel's blood ran cold. "How do they know about?" The farmer shook his head. "The war has eyes everywhere, child." Armed with this knowledge, they altered their route, moving further east before turning north again. Each night brought new dangers, patrol dogs barking in the distance, the glow of campfires they dared not approach, the crack of rifles hunting deserters. Elijah's wound improved slowly, but fever set in on their 10th day. They found shelter in an abandoned woodsman's cabin deep in the Pennsylvania forest. For 2 days, Samuel foraged for food and changed Elijah's bandages, watching helplessly as the man alternated between shivering chills and burning fever. "Leave me," Elijah mumbled during a moment of clarity. "Complete your mission. No one gets behind," repeating Captain Harrison's favorite saying. "We'll go together or not at all." On the third morning, Samuel was collecting water when he heard horses. He flattened himself behind a fallen log as 5 Confederate cavalrymen rode past, close enough that he could hear their conversation. "Drummer boy can't have gotten far," one was saying, "not carrying a full-sized flag. Why's Stuart so fixed on finding some banner anyway? War's turning against us after Gettysburg. Morale," the first. "Capturing a Union regiment's colors is a powerful symbol, especially with the Massachusetts regiments gaining fame." Samuel remained motionless. They passed, then hurried back to warn Elijah. But when he reached the cabin, he found Elijah standing at the door, supporting himself without his crutch for the first time. "Fever broke in the night," Elijah explained. "We need to move." I heard them too. That night they pushed harder than before, Elijah moving with determination despite his still healing wound. They crossed a shallow river that would hide their scent from tracking dogs, then continued northeast. "Why are you helping me?" Samuel asked as they rested. "You could move faster alone." Elijah was silent for a long moment. "When I escaped, a white boy about your age gave me water and direction, right under his father's nose. Got whipped for it afterward." He adjusted the bandage on his. "Figure I owe his kind a debt." Samuel thought about this. "My pa used to say there are no sides when it comes to doing what's right." "Your pa sounds like a wise man. He died at Antietam with the same regiment as Captain Harrison." They continued in silence, each lost in thoughts of those. Near dawn they crested a hill and saw a small town in the valley. Lights glowed in a few windows despite the early. "Carlisle?" Elijah. "Union-controlled. We'll find help there." But as they started down the slope, a voice called from the trees behind them. "That's far enough, boy." Samuel turned to find a Confederate officer training a revolver on. The gray uniform bore the insignia of cavalry, one of Stuart's scouts. "Been tracking you for days," the officer said, his Virginia accent pronounced. "Now hand over that flag you're carrying, and I might let you live." Samuel's heart hammered against his ribs. He stepped slightly in front of Elijah, though the gesture offered little protection against the Confederate officer's revolver. "I don't know what you're talking about," trying to keep his steady. The officer's laugh was cold. "Don't play dumb, boy. We know you took the colors of the 20th Massachusetts from Gettysburg. My commander wants that flag." Elijah leaned heavily on his good leg. "The boy's with me, my master's son, taking me north to work his uncle's farm." "Odile. Quiet, boy," the officer snapped, not taking his eyes off Samuel. "I wasn't at Gettysburg, but I heard about a drummer who disappeared with regimental colors. Word travels." He gestured with his revolver. "Now hand it over, and I might let you both go." Samuel's mind. The town of Carlisle lay tantalizingly close, but they'd never reach it before being. The flag was hidden in his pack, wrapped in oilcloth, protected from rain. A twig snapped in the woods behind the office. His head turned slightly at the sound, just enough distraction for Elijah to act. The tall man grabbed a stone and hurled it with surprising force, striking the Confederate's gun hand. The revolver discharged harmlessly into the ground. Samuel bolted, not toward Carlisle, but into the dense woodland to their right. He heard Elijah following, moving remarkably fast despite his injury. The officer's curses, the crash of pursuit followed close behind. They ran blindly through the underbrush, branches whipping their faces. Samuel clutched his pack tightly, protecting the precious flag inside. The woods grew denser, slowing their pursuer. "This way!" Pulling him down a embankment toward a small stream. The cold water soaking their already tattered clothes. On the far bank, a narrow path wound between. "Underground Railroad trail," Elijah between follows water when track. They pushed on, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter. The July heat made the air heavy and humid under. After what seemed like hours, they emerged from the woods into a small clearing. A modest farmhouse stood surrounded by fields of corn and wheat. Smoke rose from the chimney, despite the summer warmth. "We need help," Elijah said, leaning against a tree. His leg wound had reopened during their flight, blood seeping through the bandage. Samuel approached the farmhouse cautious. No quilt hung out, no signal, but they had little choice with Elijah's wound bleeding and the Confederate officer surely summoning reinforcements. A woman appeared in the doorway before he reached it. She held a shotgun with practiced ease, her weathered face set in grim line. Gray streaked her dark hair, which was pulled back in a severe bun. "That's far enough. State your business." "Please, ma'am," Samuel replied, raising his empty hands. "My friend is injured. We're being pursued." The woman's eyes narrowed, taking in his ragged appearance. "Pursued by whom?" "Confederate scouts. They're looking for me." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Your friend." Bring him here. Samuel helped Elijah to the farmhouse. The woman stepped aside, allowing them entry, but kept her shotgun ready. "I'm Sarah Winters," he said, closing the door behind them. "My husband died at Chancellorsville with the Pennsylvania Volunteers. I don't much care for visitors wearing gray." "No, ma'am," Samuel assured her. "I'm with the 20th Massachusetts, drummer boy." "Elijah here was heading north when we met." Sarah gestured toward a wooden table. "Sit. Let me see that leg." As she examined Elijah's wound, Samuel explained their situation, Captain Harrison's final order, the flag he carried, their journey north, and the Confederate officer tracking. "Stuart's men have been raiding all through these parts since before Gettysburg," Sarah said, cleaning Elijah's wound with practiced movement, "stealing horses, burning barns. They're desperate after their defeat." "The battle is over?" Samuel asked eagerly. "The Union won. Lee's army retreated south 2 days ago. The newspapers say it was a great victory, though at terrible cost." She finished bandaging Elijah's leg, but scattered Confederate units are still about, causing trouble as they withdraw. A distant barking reached them through the open window. "Tracking dogs." Sarah's face hardened. "They've used dogs on my property before, hunting escaped slaves. There's a cellar beneath the barn, hidden entrance under the hay bale. Go there now." "What about you, Samuel?" "I'll handle them." She checked her shotgun. "Been dealing with raiders for 2 years now." Samuel and Elijah hurried to the barn, finding the cellar entrance where Sarah had indicated. The small space below smelled of earth and root vegetables. They pulled the trapdoor closed above them just as the dogs' barking grew louder. Through cracks in the barn's wooden foundation, they could see riders approaching the farmhouse. The Confederate officer who had confronted them was accompanied by 3 others, the dogs straining at their leash. "They'll tear this place apart looking for us, Samuel. Mrs. Winters knows what she's doing. Watch." Sarah met the riders on her porch, shotgun resting casually in the crook of her arm. Even from a distance, her posture showed no fear. "Ma'am," the other called, "we're tracking fugitives, a boy and a Negro. Seen them?" "Haven't seen anyone but you," Sarah read coldly. "And I'll thank you to keep your dogs off my property. They frighten my chickens." The dogs pulled toward the barn, barking excitedly. "Seems they've picked up a scent," the officer. "Well, mind if we search your buildings?" "I do mind." Sarah raised her shotgun slightly. "My husband died fighting your kind. I've got nothing to say to Confederates except get off my land." The officer signaled his men to spread out. "This won't take long, ma'am." Sarah fired a shot into the air. "Next one won't miss. I've got neighbors within earshot, Union militia that would love an excuse to ride down here." The Confederates hesitated, weighing the situation. The officer scowled at Sarah, clearly unwilling to leave, but wary of creating a larger incident in Union-held territory. "The boy has stolen property," he tried again, "a flag of great value to its rightful owners. The only thieves on my property are wearing gray." For a tense moment, Samuel thought the officer would order an attack. Instead, he reined his horse around sharply. "This isn't finished," he warned Sarah. "We'll be watching this farm." "And I'll be waiting," she answered, the shotgun still ready. The Confederates rode away, not toward Carlisle, instead heading east, parallel to the main road. "They're setting up an ambush, cutting off the route to town." They remained hidden until Sarah came to retrieve them an hour later. "You can't stay. They'll be back with more men. But you can't head to Carlisle either. They'll be watching all approaches." "We need to reach Boston, Samuel. I promised my captain." Sarah studied the boy's determined face. "There's a Union cavalry patrol that passes 5 miles north of here every other day. Tomorrow morning, they'll come. If you can reach them, they'll escort you to safe territory." That night, Sarah fed them a proper meal, their first in weeks. She mended their clothes as best she could and provided fresh bandages for Elijah's leg. After dinner, Samuel carefully unwrapped the flag to show her. The silk was wrinkled but intact, the golden tassel still gleaming in the candlelight. "My Henry would understand what this means," Sarah said, touching the fabric with reverence. "A regiment's colors are its." As Samuel rewrapped the flag, Sarah pressed something into his hand, a small pocket compass that belonged to her husband. "Northeast to Boston. Follow the North Star when clouds hide the sun." Samuel closed his fingers around the compass. "Thank you, ma'am, for everything. Just make sure that flag gets home, boy." "That's thanks enough." Before dawn, Sarah woke them with urgency in her voice. Confederate riders passed on the road, at least a dozen. "You need to leave now." She provided a small bundle of food and a canteen of water. Samuel secured the flag inside his jacket, double-checking that it was completely hidden. Elijah tested his leg, finding it stronger after a night of proper rest. "Follow the stream northward," Sarah instructed, pointing into the pre-dawn darkness. "Stay in the water when you can to hide your scent. The cavalry patrol follows the ridge road about 5 miles north. Samuel clutched the compass she had given him. "We'll make it, ma'am." "God go with you both," she replied, her weathered face solemn in the lantern light. They slipped out the back of the barn, moving silently across the dew-damp fields toward the tree line. The stream Sarah had mentioned was shallow but swift, its cold water numbing their feet as they waded through it. "She risked everything for us," Samuel said quietly. The farmhouse appeared from view. "Many have," Elijah replied. "That's how the Underground Railroad works. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things." They followed the stream for nearly 2 hours, the rising sun filtering through the trees overhead. Birds called in the branches, strange counterpoint to the distant rumble of hooves and occasional crack of rifles that reminded them of the war. "We're getting close to the ridge road. The patrol should pass within the hour, if the widow's information is correct." They found a position among some rocks overlooking the road, concealed by thick bushes. Samuel's stomach growled loudly, reminding him how little they'd eaten during their journey. He retrieved some bread from Sarah's bundle, breaking it in half to share with. "What will you do?" Samuel asked. "After we find the patrol." Elijah chewed thoughtfully. "Continue north. Find my brother if I can. If not," he shrugged, "fight for freedom in whatever way I'm able. You could come to Boston with deliver the flag to." Before Elijah could answer, the unmistakable sound of horses approached from the east. They flattened themselves against the rocks, peering cautiously through the Confederate gray uniforms, at least 8 moving slowly, clearly searching. Among them, the officer who had confronted them. "They're between us and the Union patrol route. We need to circle around." As they retreated deeper into the undergrowth, a shout went up from the road. "Tracks here! They crossed the stream!" "Run!" Elijah urged, pushing Samuel ahead of him. They crashed through the forest, abandoning stealth for speed. Behind them, horses splashed across the stream, riders calling to each other as they picked up the trail. Samuel clutched the flag against his chest as he ran, determined not to lose it after coming so far. The woods thinned suddenly, opening onto the ridge road, a dirt track wide enough for wagons cutting across the rolling Pennsylvania landscape. And there, approaching from the west, was the answer to their prayers. Blue uniforms, a dozen Union cavalry soldiers riding in formation. "There!" Samuel shouted, waving frantically. "Union patrol!" The cavalry spotted them immediately, several riders breaking formation and galloping forward. Behind them, the Confederate pursuit emerged from the trees, pulling up short at the sight of the larger Union force. "Help!" Samuel called. "Confederates chasing us!" The Union captain, a young man with a neatly trimmed beard, assessed the situation quickly. "Secure those two," he ordered his men, pointing at Elijah. To the rest of his patrol, "Form line." The Confederates, outnumbered, wheeled their horses and retreated into the forest. A few Union soldiers fired after them, but the captain called them back. "Let them go. We're not here to fight skirmishes." He turned his attention to Samuel and Elijah. "Now, who are you, and why are Confederate scouts so interested in a boy and a wounded black man?" Samuel straightened, summoning what dignity he could in his ragged state. "Drummer Samuel Jenkins, 20th Massachusetts, sir, and this is Elijah Freeman." The captain's eyebrows rose. "Long way from your regiment, drummer boy." With trembling hands, Samuel opened his jacket and carefully withdrew the silk bundle. He unwrapped it to reveal the colors of the 20th Massachusetts, its battle honors still visible despite the journey. The cavalrymen fell. Several removed their hats. "Captain William Harrison gave me his final order at Gettysburg," Samuel, his voice steady despite his exhaustion, "to take the regimental colors to his wife in Boston. I promised him I would." The captain dismounted slowly, approaching to examine the flag. "I know the 20th. They lost nearly 2/3 of their men at Gettysburg." He looked at Samuel with new respect. "You've carried this across enemy territory for over 100 miles?" "Yes, sir, with Elijah's help." The captain turned to Elijah, noting his injury and bearing. "You're not in uniform." "No, sir," Elijah lied cautious. A young lieutenant spoke up. "Sir, he's clearly a runaway. He's a free man helping a Union soldier complete a mission," the captain called firmly. "That's all we need to know." He turned back to Samuel. "We'll escort you to Harrisburg. From there, you can take the military train to Philadelphia, then on to Boston." For the first time in weeks, Samuel felt the weight lifting from his shoulders. "Thank you, sir." 3 days later, Samuel and Elijah stood on the platform of the Boston train station. The journey from Harrisburg had been remarkably swift and comfortable compared to their earlier ordeal. The Union Army had provided them with new clothes, proper medical attention for Elijah's leg, and military passes to train. "This is where we part ways." Samuel looked up at his companion, the man who had become both protector and friend during their journey. "You could stay. There are communities of free blacks here." He shook his. "My brother might still be with the 54th. I need to find him." He extended his hand. "Complete your mission, Samuel Jenkins. Honor your captain's memory." Samuel shook the offered hand, fighting back tears. "I couldn't have made it without you." "You could have. You're stronger than you know." They parted there, Elijah heading to the recruitment office to inquire about the 54th Massachusetts, Samuel making his way through the unfamiliar streets of Boston with Captain Harrison's address clutched in his hand. He found the house on Beacon Hill, a handsome brownstone with polished brass fixtures. For a long moment Samuel stood outside, suddenly afraid. What would he say to Elizabeth Harrison? How could he tell her that her husband was gone? Before he could decide, the door opened. A woman with dark hair appeared, the same face as in the photograph Samuel had carried all these weeks. "Can I help you?" she asked, taking in his appearance, the too large uniform, the exhausted young face. Samuel removed his cap. "Mrs. Harrison, I'm Samuel Jenkins, drummer with the 20th Massachusetts. Your husband's regiment." Her standing dawn followed. "William. He fell at Gettysburg, ma'am. I was with him at the end." Samuel carefully unwrapped the flag he had carried for so many miles. "His last words were of you. He asked me to bring this home." Elizabeth Harrison's hand went to her mouth, tears filling her eyes, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "You carried our colors all the way from Pennsylvania? Alone?" "I had help, ma'am. Good people who believed in what the flag stands for." She stepped back, opening the door wider. "Please come in. Tell me everything." As Samuel crossed the threshold, carrying the colors of the 20th Massachusetts, he felt Captain Harrison's presence one last time. The mission was complete, the promise fulfilled. The flag had come home.